I walked into that dinner thinking I was finally part of something real, but by dessert I realized I was the punchline to a joke I never knew they were telling. If you've ever felt like the outsider at your own family table, if you've ever dared to speak up only to be met with silence, or worse, laughter, stay with me. I promise, you're not alone in this. Because the story didn't start with a scream, it started with a smile, and my sister's perfectly timed laugh. I'm Evelina Voss. I'm 29. I live in Seattle and work as an interior designer. I spend my days making broken spaces beautiful, but I never imagined I'd be the one shattered by the people I called family. But back then, I wasn't thinking about damage. I was thinking about Grandma Elsie's house and the promise she made to me the year before she died. It was a rainy Sunday, one of those soft Seattle evenings where the sky turns bruised gray by 5 and the lights from inside the houses feel warmer than they should. I remember smoothing my dress before stepping through the front door of our childhood home, the one on Tanglewood Lane with the uneven porch step and the mailbox that still said Voss family in peeling vinyl letters. The smell hit me first. Mom's roast chicken, rosemary, and garlic, wrapped in the low murmur of clinking glasses and polite conversation. I walked in smiling. "I'm ready to claim Grandma Elsie's house," I said, half laughing, half nervous. The room didn't smile back. Marissa, my sister, older by 5 years and colder by 20, didn't miss a beat. She tilted her head, wine glass in hand, and let out this small, amused scoff. "Oh, you believe that?" she said, voice syrupy and cruel. "That's cute." I blinked. For a second I thought I misheard, but then I looked around. Dad cleared his throat. Mom avoided my eyes, suddenly too busy cutting into her green beans, and just like that, the ground under my feet cracked open. My chest felt tight. I remember gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. The room felt too warm, the laughter from the kitchen radio too loud, too fake. "You knew," I whispered, not sure who I was speaking to. No one answered. No one needed to. All I could hear was Marissa's nails tapping against her phone beneath the tablecloth. She was texting, smiling. That's when I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding. This was planned, calculated. I forced myself to sit down, swallowing the lump in my throat. Every bite of dinner tasted like cardboard. Every glance from across the table carried a weight I couldn't name yet, but I felt it. Heavy, condescending, triumphant. I remembered the afternoon Grandma Elsie made me tea in her tiny floral kitchen, how she'd pulled me aside after everyone else had left. Her hands, always so warm, had squeezed mine. "This house is yours, Evie," she'd said. "I want you to build something here. A life, a future." I'd held on to that memory like a lifeline, until Marissa cut it with 6 words. "Oh, you believe that? That's cute." Even now, I don't know what hurt more, her smirk or their silence. I excused myself early, muttering something about a client call. No one stopped me. Outside, the wind had picked up. The rain had left the pavement slick, and the headlights of passing cars stretched long and watery across the road. I sat in my car for 10 full minutes before starting the engine. My hands trembled against the steering wheel. I wasn't angry yet, not really. At that point, I still hoped someone would call, that maybe Mom would text, that Dad would explain, that Marissa had lied or misunderstood. But no one did. And as I pulled out of that driveway, I caught a final glimpse of the dining room through the front window. Marissa leaning back in her chair, phone still in hand, her mouth curled in a smile. That was the moment I stopped hoping. That was the moment something inside me went still, cold, sharp. I didn't have a plan yet, just one quiet promise echoing in my chest. They think this is over, but it's only just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the soft red glow of the alarm clock slicing the darkness like a wound. 2:14, 3:27, 4:02. Every hour passed like a dare I couldn't answer. Marissa's laugh kept echoing in my head, not just what she said, "Oh, you believe that?" but how she said it, like the whole thing had been rehearsed, practiced, like she'd waited for that moment. By morning, my eyes felt like sandpaper and my jaw ached from clenching through my teeth. Still, I got dressed. I moved. I needed answers, something real I could hold in my hand. I started with the will. I still remembered the day we all sat in that sterile law office. The air smelled like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. The leather chairs were stiff. The lawyer was colder. She read through the legalese like it was the grocery list for someone else's life. By the time she said Marissa's name, "To my granddaughter, Marissa Voss, I leave the property and all contents therein." I stopped listening. I thought there had been some mistake. I even glanced at Dad, but he was nodding, calm, like he already knew. I remember leaving the office with a nausea I couldn't name. I didn't cry that day. I just went home, poured a glass of wine I didn't want, and tried not to scream. But now I couldn't pretend anymore. So I drove to Grandma Elsie's house. It had been empty since the funeral, just dust, shadows, and old air sealed behind brittle windows. I let myself in with the spare key hidden under the third flower pot. Grandma had never believed in digital locks. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and mothballs, like memory. I moved slowly through the house, each creaking floorboard, whispering names and arguments and Sunday dinners. My hand trailed along the wallpaper in the hallway, the one I helped her choose in 8th grade, faded roses on pale green. She called it delicate rebellion, said it reminded her that softness and strength didn't have to be opposites. I headed for the attic. The pull-down stairs groaned under my weight. The air up there was dense, like it hadn't been breathed in months. Dust floated in the shafts of light that sliced through the slats. Boxes were stacked like forgotten promises, and in the far corner, under a moth-eaten quilt, I found the metal trunk I remembered from childhood. My fingers hesitated over the latch. Then I flipped it open. Old documents, letters, receipts, and there, a copy of Grandma's will. But something was off. The signature at the bottom didn't look like hers. Too neat, too practiced. And the date. It was 2 months before she died. But I knew she had updated it the year before. She told me she had. My stomach twisted. I lifted the paper with shaking hands. There were faint impressions beneath it, as if something else had been written, or erased. My heart pounded. Downstairs a floorboard creaked. I froze. The air shifted, just slightly, but enough to make the hair on my arms stand up. I held my breath, listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the house settling, or something pretending to be. I tucked the paper into my bag, locked the trunk, and backed away. On the stairs down, I paused. There was a whisper in the back of my mind, like Grandma's voice. "Be careful who you trust, Evie." Later that evening, I sat in my apartment rereading the document under bright desk light. My hands kept smoothing the edges over and over, like touch alone could make sense of it. There was something wrong here. I knew it in my gut. That's when I remembered the night after the will reading, how I'd passed the guest bathroom on my way out and heard Marissa's voice. She was on the phone, hushed but smug. "All tied up," she'd said. "The old will's gone, and the new one? Signed, sealed, notarized. It's handled." Then a pause. A laugh. "No, she has no idea. Poor girl still thinks Grandma loved her best." My body went cold. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I was too numb, too broken. But now it struck like a match in a dark room. She knew. She planned it. I reached for my phone, my hand still shaking. Part of me wanted to call her, scream, demand the truth. But another part, stronger, quieter, told me to wait, to watch, to be careful. I opened a new folder on my desktop, House Evidence. It wasn't much yet, just a forged will and a memory, but it was a start. And somewhere deep in my chest, the first spark of fury caught flame. I wouldn't let this go. Not again. Not this time. The attic still smelled like dust and dried lavender, like memory trapped in cotton. I was back the next morning, too restless to stay away. The fake will was stashed safe in my apartment, but something about the trunk gnawed at me. There were layers to this story, layers Marissa wanted buried. The air was colder than yesterday. Light poured through the narrow attic window, streaking across floating dust like falling ash. I moved slowly this time, hands grazing the boxes, fingers lingering on old ribbons, forgotten frames, faded receipts. And then I saw it, a plain envelope wedged beneath the false bottom of the trunk. Its seal was thick wax, deep crimson, cracked down the center. The initials curled across it in delicate strokes, EV. My breath caught. My heart was suddenly too loud in my chest. I peeled it open with trembling hands. The paper inside was yellowing, soft with age, but her handwriting, I would have known it anywhere. Grandma Elsie had a way of writing like she was always in conversation with you, looping her letters gently, like she was guiding your eyes. I sat down right there on the attic floor, cross-legged like a child. The floorboards creaked beneath me, but I barely noticed. "My dearest Evie," it began, "if you're reading this, I suppose something didn't go to plan." I felt a tear trace the edge of my nose. Her voice filled the room as I read. "You've always been the one who saw things clearly, even when it hurt, even when no one believed you. This house, it belongs to you not just by promise, but by purpose. You were always meant to carry it forward." I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to stop the sob rising in my throat. She knew they would try something. "If someone has taken what's yours, I need you to remember this. I didn't leave everything in one place. There is a second key, and not everyone who smiles at you is on your side." Second key? I read the line again. Second key. My eyes darted around the attic, suddenly aware of everything as a potential hiding spot, but the letter didn't say where. "Some secrets are safer when they're scattered," it ended. "You'll know where to look. Trust your instincts. You always have." No signature, no date, just the scent of dried rose petals clinging to the page. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. My fingers felt stiff, like even they were stunned. I sat there for minutes, knees numb from the hardwood, mind racing. Why didn't she tell me about the second key in person? Who else knew? And what did it open? A floorboard creaked. This time it wasn't me. I froze. The attic door was still open behind me. But that noise, it came from below. The stairs? I rose quietly, dust clinging to my jeans, and stepped across the floor with slow, careful feet. The house was too still, too silent. I reached the attic entrance and paused at the top of the stairs, held my breath. A faint sound, movement, from the hallway downstairs. I backed up slowly, grabbed the nearest object, a rusted candle holder, and held it tight. My palms were sweating. Nothing. No voice, no footsteps. Just that gnawing quiet. I waited another minute, too, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. Finally, I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. Still. I didn't go down, not right away. Whoever or whatever was there had either left or never wanted to be seen. When I did descend, every step creaked louder than I wanted it to. I checked every room, every lock, every shadow. Nothing. But the back door, the one that always stuck a little when you pulled it open, it wasn't closed all the way. It hung open half an inch, the latch undone. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just shut it slowly and locked it tight. Later, back in my apartment, I sat at the table with the letter in one hand and my phone in the other. I didn't know who to call. Marissa? She'd lie. Dad? He'd deflect. Mom? She'd stay silent. I was alone in this, but not helpless. I laid out everything I had. Grandma's forged will, her letter, the phrase, "second key." And then I did something I hadn't let myself do in weeks. I cried. Not out of weakness, out of rage. Because this house wasn't just some pretty piece of property on the family tree. It was mine. Not for status or money, but because she trusted me to protect it. And now someone was trying to erase that. No, they wouldn't win. I dried my face, lit a candle, and slid the letter back into its envelope. Then I sat down with a pen and notepad, and I started planning. But just as I began to write, a chill ran through me. The hair on my arms lifted. I turned toward the window. Outside, just beyond the curtain, something moved. A shadow. Too tall for the wind. Too still for coincidence. I got up, heart hammering, and yanked the curtain back. Nothing. Just the empty street. Wet pavement. A single leaf skidding by. But something in me shifted. This wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. This was war. I couldn't sleep. Again. But this time it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was the heat of something sharper, something cleaner, vengeance. The moment I closed my eyes, I saw Marissa's face. Smug, polished, protected. She thought she'd won. But Grandma's letter still sat on my nightstand, a lifeline in slanted cursive. And now that second key wasn't just a riddle, It was a promise. But before I went hunting for that, I needed to hit back. Visibly. I needed to break the illusion of her control. I pulled out my sketch pad and opened my laptop. By daylight, I was a designer. At 2:07 a.m., I became something else. The county clerk's website loaded slowly, the page still stuck in an outdated layout. I scrolled through the digital forms, my pulse quickening. Ownership transfer, title correction, dispute filings. I read, reread, traced my finger down the process, then opened Photoshop. Designing fake documents isn't that different from building floor plans. Same obsession with spacing, alignment, flow. The old deed sat scanned in my folder from months ago. I pulled it up. Then I did what Marissa never thought I could. I reversed the deed, filed it under my name. I even mocked up a clerical correction notice using the county's own letterhead. When I finished, I stared at the screen. My heart pounded with something close to thrill. It wasn't legal, not yet. But it looked real enough to trigger chaos. I printed everything, placed it in a slim folder. And at 4:43 a.m., I left my apartment with my hair tucked into a baseball cap and that folder pressed to my ribs. Seattle was still dark, that eerie violet hour when the world hasn't decided if it's night or morning. The clerk's office didn't open for hours, but the external drop box for late filings, always available. I slipped the folder in, and just like that, I declared war. By the time the sun broke through the gray, I was back home, sipping 2 strong coffee and staring at my phone. I didn't expect immediate fallout, but I didn't have to wait long. That evening at 7:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. Marissa, not a call, a text. Marissa, what the hell did you do? I smiled. It wasn't wide, just a twitch at the corner of my mouth. But it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. Me. You should check the property records. The typing dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I sat on the floor, leaned my back against the kitchen cabinets, and waited. 10 minutes later, the family group chat lit up. Dad. Evie, is this some kind of mistake? Mom. There's a discrepancy with the house title. What is going on? Marissa. This is illegal. Torrin. Wait, what? I thought... Marissa, didn't you say it was finalized? That one made me pause. Torrin had been so quiet until now. Was he just confused or caught? I didn't reply. Not yet. I just watched them scramble, each new message like oxygen. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt visible. But power is always borrowed when it's built on deception. By midnight, Marissa had sent 4 texts and 1 voicemail. I didn't open any of them. The last message just read, Marissa, you're going to regret this. I read it 3 times. Not because I was scared, because of what it didn't say. She didn't ask how I did it. She didn't try to defend herself. She just jumped straight to threats, which meant one thing. She knew exactly what I'd found, and she knew it was real enough to scare her. I shut off my phone and leaned back into the couch cushions. The quiet was thick, punctuated only by the ticking of the old wall clock. Grandma's clock, the one I took from her mantel when they weren't looking. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I felt her there, like her presence stretched across the silence, warm and steady. You did good, I imagined her saying. Now be careful, because that was the thing about victories. They always came with consequences. The next morning, the sun was high and blinding as I stood on the sidewalk outside Grandma's house. I held the legal notice I'd mocked up. A neighbor across the street watched me curiously from her porch swing. I smiled at her, small and tight. Then I slid the envelope into the mailbox with one deliberate push. By the time Marissa received it, the county would still be sorting out the fake paperwork. I didn't want to steal the house. I just wanted to pull the thread hard enough for everything else to unravel. But the second I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I froze. Not spam, not local. Just a single ring, then voicemail. The message icon stared at me. I hesitated, thumb hovering. Then I played it. A voice, low, quiet, male, unfamiliar. You think she acted alone? You're wrong. Click. I stared at the screen. Heat crawled up my spine. This wasn't just Marissa. Someone else was in on it. And whoever they were watching. The voicemail played on repeat in my head. That voice, low, deliberate, male, slipped beneath my skin like a cold draft. You think she acted alone? You're wrong. Just 7 words, and yet the air felt different now, thicker, like I was no longer just fighting Marissa. I turned the lock on my front door twice, then pushed the chain across, not because I thought it would stop anyone, but because I needed the illusion of control. It was raining again. Outside, the glass pane shimmered with long, steady streaks, Seattle's trademark downpour casting a soft, silver wash across the windows. Inside, only the amber glow of my floor lamp cut through the dark, pooling across the rug like a warm, flickering puddle. I curled up on the couch, phone clutched in my hand. My thumb hovered over the voicemail again. Play, pause, delete. I did none of them. Instead, I reached for Grandma's letter. The crease in the page had grown soft from how often I'd opened it. I read it aloud this time, slowly, as if her voice could drown out the one from the message. Some secrets are safer when they're scattered. And then there was the line I kept circling back to. Not everyone who smiles at you is on your side. I thought about the call. The voice hadn't introduced itself. No name, no number, which meant they knew me, and they didn't want me to know them. That was worse. I rubbed my thumb against my lower lip, a nervous tic from childhood that had somehow returned. Grandma's house sat in limbo now, a digital war zone of fake documents and paper truths, but the real battle hadn't even started yet. I needed a lead, and all I had was a half-erased voice and a handful of unsolved puzzles. I stood and paced. Rain tapped the window rhythmically like a warning. I reached for the attic file again, flipping through receipts, photos, even a few handwritten grocery lists. Nothing felt relevant, until I noticed the corner of the letter again. There, a scratch-out. It wasn't obvious, not unless you tilted it against the light just right, but beneath Grandma's ink, another name had once been written. Black pen, hurriedly scribbled out. I stared at it. A single capital letter was still legible. R. My heart stuttered. Robert? No. She always called him Bob, never Robert. That wasn't her tone when she wrote it. I pulled the letter close, studying the curve of the lines, the faint pressure marks underneath. Who had she tried to name, and then changed her mind? I grabbed my phone and opened the voice recorder, played the voicemail again, slowed it down, closed my eyes. You think she acted alone. You're wrong. It didn't sound like Dad. Didn't sound like Torin. But something about it felt familiar, not the voice itself, the way he said she, not your sister, not Marissa, just she, as if he assumed I knew who he meant, which I did, and now I had to ask, who else did? I decided to go back to the house. It was impulsive, it was reckless, but something in me said, the attic wasn't finished with me yet. I pulled on my coat, shoved Grandma's letter into my inner pocket, and stepped into the rain. It was cold and relentless, soaking my shoulders before I even reached the car. The drive through the suburbs was quiet, headlights stretching long across the wet road. When I arrived, the house looked exactly as I'd left it, dark, still, untouched. I let myself in with the key. Everything smelled of damp wood and silence. I didn't bother with lights. I knew the creaks by heart. Up the stairs, through the narrow hallway, to the attic door. The ladder groaned as I pulled it down. Up there the air was heavier than before, thicker, like someone had breathed secrets into it and shut the door. I moved slowly, past the boxes, past the trunk, toward the wall behind the wardrobe. I don't know why I looked there, maybe instinct, maybe her voice in my bones. I pressed my palm against the wood paneling. Nothing, then something. A hollow thud beneath the wallboard. My pulse kicked. I dropped to my knees, pried at the edges. The panel came loose, just enough to slip my fingers behind it. Inside, a velvet pouch. Dark green, dusty, heavy. I held it like it might burn. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside, a small brass key, and beneath it, a folded scrap of paper. 2 words, scrawled in Grandma's hand. The desk. I stared at the note. The desk. She had dozens. But only one stayed locked. The old secretary desk in the corner of her bedroom, the one she never let us touch. I stood up, knees stiff, and moved to the bedroom. The desk sat there, untouched, its surface a shrine of dried lavender, faded lace, and photographs. The key slid in with a soft click. Inside, papers, a locket, a small box wrapped in twine. But before I could take anything out, my phone buzzed. I jumped, heart thudding. It was a text, unknown number, just 5 words. "You're not safe there. Leave." I looked toward the hallway. The silence outside the door had changed. It was too quiet, like someone was listening. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the phone. "You're not safe there. Leave." The text felt like an invisible hand pressing against my spine. I looked up from the unlocked desk, back toward the door. The house had gone too still again. A chill crept along my collarbone. I slipped the small twine-wrapped box and the locket from the drawer into my coat pocket and backed away from the desk. No footsteps, no voices. Just that unnatural quiet pressing in on all sides. I left everything else behind. By the time I reached the front door, my hands were slick on the knob. The porch light buzzed faintly. Rain glistened on the sidewalk like scattered glass. I didn't see anyone, but I didn't wait to find out. I drove. Faster than I should have, windshield wipers barely keeping up. The streetlights blurred into soft halos through the fog. And still, that voice from the voicemail echoed in my chest. "You think she acted alone? You're wrong." Back at my apartment, I locked the door behind me and slid to the floor, pulse still pounding. That's when I did something I didn't expect. I called Torin, not because I trusted him, but because if anyone else was circling this mess, he'd know. Or he'd slip and let something show. The line rang twice. Then, "Evie?" His voice sounded breathless, like he hadn't expected to hear from me. I paused, then asked quietly, "Can you come over?" A beat. "Yeah, give me 15. He was early, 12 minutes, and when I opened the door, he looked off. Rain in his hair. Hoodie clinging to his arms, eyes darting, guilty. I stepped back to let him in. "I didn't think you'd call me," he said, peeling off his wet jacket. "I almost didn't." He gave a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I watched the way his hands fidgeted, rubbing one thumb into the other palm over and over. "I found something," I said. His head snapped up. "What?" I held up the locket first. Old, brass, the back etched with a date, 1964. Then the box. I unwrapped the twine slowly, watching his face. Inside, just old papers, a photo, a single gold coin. But I didn't look at them. Not yet. Because Torin wasn't looking at them either. He was looking at me, too intently, too carefully. "Torin," I said, "did Marissa ask you to watch me?" He blinked. "What?" "No." Too fast. I stared at him. Didn't say anything. He shifted in his seat, then let out a breath and ran a hand through his damp hair. "She's scared, that's all. Ever since the deed stuff." "She's scared?" My voice cracked. "She stole from me." I know, he said quickly. I don't want things to blow up more." I narrowed my eyes. "You're lying." He flinched. That's when I moved, grabbed the papers from the box and held them up. His eyes flicked to the top sheet, then down again like it burned him. It was a property ledger. Not just Grandma's house, a second property, one I'd never heard of. But it wasn't the address that got me. It was the signature beneath the transfer. Torin Voss. My heart dropped. "I don't understand," I whispered. He didn't deny it. He just sank back into the chair, face pale. "It was supposed to be temporary," he said. "Marissa promised me I'd get out of it." "You transferred another property from Grandma? Behind everyone's back?" "She said it was for tax reasons. Said the lawyer approved it." "Torin!" I stood. "You forged a document." His mouth opened, closed. Then he looked up at me, something desperate in his eyes. I didn't know what she was planning, not fully. She told me if I didn't help, she'd cut me out completely. "So you helped her rob me?" "It wasn't supposed to get this far." I stepped back, stomach twisting. My own brother. "I trusted you," I said quietly, and in his silence I heard the truth. He had chosen her. Maybe not forever, but long enough. "I'm done with both of you." I moved toward the door, hand on the knob, chest heaving. "Wait." His voice cracked. "Please, let me make it right." I turned, eyes narrowed. "You know what makes it right, Torin? The truth, all of it." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll show you the emails, the ones she sent me, if you still want them." I didn't answer, Not because I forgave him, but because I needed those messages. He pulled out his phone, brows furrowed, swiped, froze. "They're gone," he muttered. "What?" "She deleted them. I gave her access to my drive just to clean stuff and, Torin, I'm sorry, I didn't think clearly." I turned back to the desk, every nerve in my body buzzing. I needed something, anything, to make this make sense. I grabbed the photo from the box. Old, yellowed, Grandma, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Dark hair, deep lines, not Grandpa. On the back in Grandma's careful script, he promised to protect what they wouldn't. I stared at the man's face, and suddenly, I didn't feel like I was fighting just a greedy sister anymore. This wasn't just inheritance. This was history, buried deep, and now, someone was determined to keep it that way. The photo lay between us on the table, curling at the edges, like time had been trying to eat it alive. Grandma, and that man, not Grandpa, not anyone I recognized. Her hand rested lightly on the man's forearm, and her smile, it wasn't just polite. It was trusting, grateful, and scrawled on the back, in ink that had started to bleed, he promised to protect what they wouldn't. The line looped in my head as I stared across the small cafe table at Marissa. "I know about the second property," I said, voice low but steady, "and I know about the forged deed." Marissa didn't flinch. She stirred her latte slowly, eyes on the foam like it had more value than I ever did. "You're throwing accusations around like confetti," she said flatly. "I'm throwing truth." Her smile was tight, pitying. "Evie, you're not built for this. All this scheming, the drama, it's exhausting watching you try." That stung more than I wanted to admit, because some part of me still remembered sharing a bunk bed with her at Grandma's on summer weekends, her whispering made-up stories in the dark. Some part of me still wanted her to care. But the woman in front of me was no longer my sister. She was my opponent. "You altered Grandma's will," I said. "I found the original. I found the letter. She didn't want you near that house." Marissa blinked once, then leaned back in her seat, arms crossed. "So go to court." I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo, slid it across the table. She glanced at it. 1 second, then 2. Her posture changed. She went still, just for a heartbeat, but I saw it. Something about that man, whoever he was, meant something to her too. She pushed the photo back. "Is that supposed to scare me?" "No, but it's going to scare someone." Marissa's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "You're nervous." For the first time since this whole mess began, I felt the scales shift. Just a little. Just enough to stand taller in my seat. "You played this beautifully," I said. "For a while. The doctored will, the backdoor transfer, making Torin your errand boy." At the mention of his name, her jaw tensed. "You think I didn't know he'd crack?" she said. "I counted on it. He's weak." "No, he's scared and guilty, which is more than I can say for you." A flicker of something flashed in her eyes, disdain maybe, or maybe it was something closer to fear. "I don't know what Grandma said to you," she muttered, "but she made promises to all of us." "She didn't promise me anything," I said quietly. "She entrusted me." Marissa rolled her eyes. "Same difference." "No, it isn't. One is entitlement. The other is legacy." That landed. She looked away, out the cafe window where a woman walked her dog beneath a red umbrella. The rain was falling again, soft, steady, and patient. "I didn't want the house for the money," she said suddenly. My chest tightened. "Then why?" She paused, then looked at me. "Because she always loved you more. And I was tired of feeling like a stranger in my own family." It was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard from her in years, but it didn't change anything. "She didn't love me more," I whispered. "She just saw me." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I pulled out the forged will and laid it on the table. Alongside it, the letter from Grandma, her voice immortal on paper. "You'll never prove that's authentic," Marissa said. "Maybe not today," I replied, "but there are people who can." She stared at the documents like they were poison. Then Dad walked in. His coat was wet, cheeks red from the cold. He spotted us, hesitated, then approached the table slowly. Marissa turned to him with wide eyes. "Dad?" "She called me," he said, cutting her off. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't warm either. Just tired. I asked him to come, I said. He looked between us, then down at the table. When his eyes landed on the will, something shifted behind them. Marissa reached for his arm. Tell her. Tell her you knew everything was legal. He pulled his arm back, slowly, deliberately. I can't, he said. Marissa's expression shattered for half a second, then she recovered. I did this for all of us, she said, barely above a whisper. No, I said, you did this for you. The room felt suddenly too small, too bright. Patrons around us had started watching. Marissa's fingers curled around the edge of the table. Then, like a switch flipped, she stood. This isn't over, she hissed. She stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots on tile. Dad sat down in the seat she left behind. He didn't say anything, just stared at the door she'd disappeared through. Why didn't you stop her? I asked softly. I thought I was keeping the peace, he said. Then after a long pause, I was wrong. We sat in silence, the weight between us heavy and unspoken. Outside, the rain picked up. My phone buzzed. I looked down. One new message, from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo of Grandma, with the same mystery man from the attic photo, only this time they were younger, closer. And in the corner of the frame, a handwritten note barely visible. If anything happens to me, follow the green ribbon. I stared at the screen, then up at Dad. I think there's more, I whispered. Much more. The photo stayed burned into my mind all night. Grandma, years younger, hair pulled into that familiar bun, standing beside a man who wasn't Grandpa, and that line, handwritten, rushed, like she didn't want anyone else to read it. If anything happens to me, follow the green ribbon. I turned it over again and again under the dim light of my desk lamp, tracing the curve of her script with my finger like it might reveal something more. But what was the green ribbon? I shut my eyes, leaning back. My chair creaked beneath me. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. My head ached with memory, confusion, doubt, and then a flash, the attic, a box tied with a green velvet ribbon, one I hadn't opened. I hadn't even questioned it at the time. It just looked like holiday junk, something sentimental. I grabbed my coat. The street outside was drenched in soft blue fog, like the city itself had secrets it didn't want to tell. By the time I reached Grandma's house, the sky was soft with early morning light, a pale lavender breaking through the clouds. The door groaned open on old hinges, the air inside damp and musty from rain. I climbed the attic stairs 2 at a time, heart pounding. The green ribbon box was still there, tucked behind an old fan and some crumbling magazines. I pulled it free. The velvet was dusty, faded to sage in the corners. My hands shook as I untied it. Inside, letters, dozens, all addressed to Evelina Elsie Voss, my grandmother. The return address? Raymond Keller, no other name, no title, just that. Each envelope was opened and refolded like they'd been read 100 times, but one was still sealed, different paper, heavy, with a wax seal just like the one on the letter I'd found before. I cracked it open slowly. Inside was a single page, scrawled in the same hand from the photo inscription. Elsie, I saw what they're doing. They'll change everything. They want what's yours because they never believed you earned it. If anything happens to you, protect the girl. She's the only one who won't fold. No signature, no date, just one final line, underlined twice. They forged the papers last winter. I stood frozen in the attic, the weight of the words anchoring me in place. Winter. That was when the will was supposedly updated, but Grandma had been sick, barely coherent. She never signed anything that winter. I thought of Dad's silence, Mom's eyes when I asked about the documents, Marissa's confidence that the forgery would hold up. They knew, they all knew. The air around me felt thinner. I looked back down into the box. There was a photo tucked between 2 letters. Not Grandma this time. A man, Raymond, I assumed, standing next to a mailbox, same green ribbon tied to the post, same house number as Grandma's, only off by 1 digit. I blinked. Wait, I knew that house. It was the old rental next door, the one that had sat vacant for years. It used to belong to a man everyone just called Ray. Nobody had seen him in ages. I raced down the attic ladder and out into the yard. The house stood quiet, dark windows, paint peeling in strips down the siding. I made my way to the back fence. Overgrown shrubs clawed at my jeans as I climbed over. I walked up to the back porch, heart hammering. There, tied around the old rail post, a piece of green velvet ribbon nearly rotted through. I stared at it, breath stuck in my chest. I knocked once. Nothing. Again. Still silence. I turned the knob. Locked. Of course it was. I stepped back, mind racing. What had Grandma hidden here? What did this man know? I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the ribbon, and started typing a note to myself. When a voice behind me said, "Looking for something?" I spun. A man stood at the edge of the yard, gray hoodie, gloves. But it wasn't just his sudden appearance that chilled me. It was his voice. I'd heard it before, on the voicemail. I backed up a step, phone still in hand. He raised his palm slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then what are you doing on private property?" "I could ask you the same." He gave a tight smile, eyes unreadable. "You've stirred something up, Evie, something bigger than you realize." My throat tightened. "You knew Grandma." He didn't answer right away. Then, "I owed her. She helped me once. I promised to return the favor." "By threatening me?" He looked down at the porch, then back at me. "No, by warning you." A gust of wind blew between us, carrying the scent of wet earth and old wood. "Go home," he said. "You don't want to find what's buried here." But I did. I wanted it more than anything. Before I could ask another question, he turned and disappeared into the trees behind the house. I ran to follow him, but by the time I reached the edge of the woods, he was gone. The woods swallowed him whole. One moment he was there, hood pulled low, voice like smoke, and the next, gone into the trees, like a ghost wrapped in warnings. I stood at the edge of the yard, damp leaves clinging to my boots, breath fogging in the cold morning air. I wasn't scared. I was done being scared. I turned back toward Grandma's house, eyes drawn to the attic window. If there was a victory in this mess, it had to start there. The door creaked shut behind me. I locked it, twice, then made my way upstairs, each step creaking like it remembered every fight I'd ever swallowed in this house. In the attic, the light slanted through the high window in a pale gold ribbon, cutting across the dust like truth trying to breathe. I sat cross-legged on the floor beside the trunk and spread everything out. The forged will, Grandma's original letter, Raymond's sealed note, the green ribbon box, and the photo, the one with the locket. I studied every item like it could still lie to me. Then I saw it. The photo frame Grandma had always kept in her bedroom, the same one I'd moved to the attic after the funeral. A brass frame, thick, heavy, but not just heavy, weighted. I lifted it, turned it over. The backing wobbled ever so slightly. My fingers worked at the seam until it popped loose, and there it was, a second key. Not a house key, smaller, older, intricate. My breath caught. I looked around the attic, heart racing. What had I missed? My eyes landed on the side wall, bare except for an old bookshelf and a stack of paint cans. I stood slowly, moved the shelf. Dust rose like a ghost in the sunlight. And behind it, a panel. It didn't match the rest of the wall, just slightly different in tone and texture. I slid the key into the notch beside it. Click. The wood shifted open. Inside was a small wall safe. Another keyhole. Same shape. My fingers trembled as I turned the key. Another click. Then the door swung open with a slow, deliberate groan. Inside, a stack of documents, taped audio cassettes, and a single velvet pouch. I reached for the documents first. At the top, the real will, not scanned, not photocopied, original, signed, dated, witnessed. And it wasn't just about the house. Grandma had named me sole heir of everything, the land, the bank accounts, even a trust I didn't know existed. I stared at the pages, my mind a tangle of disbelief and fury. She knew they'd come for it. She knew I'd need a backup plan. I flipped to the second page. Attached was a notarized statement, Grandma's handwriting again. If this version is found, it means my trust was broken by those I held closest. This is the truth. Let it defend her. My throat tightened. She hadn't just protected me. She'd prepared for me. I pulled out the tapes next, 4 of them, each labeled in her steady cursive. Marissa, October. Robert, December. Elsie, final statement. Torrin, January. I couldn't breathe. She'd recorded them. I had no idea what they said yet, but the dates matched the timeline of everything they'd tried to bury. And now? Now I held the shovel. I grabbed the velvet pouch last. Inside, the deed. Original. Unaltered. With her signature sealed beside a witness. No one could fake that paper's age. The ink. The wax. I let out a slow, shaking breath. This was it. Everything I needed to destroy the lie. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I nearly dropped the pouch. It was a text. From a contact labeled simply, Attorney, J.R. Call me. I reviewed the docs. You're in the clear to file. Let's talk strategy. My heart thumped once. Then again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. I laid the will flat across the floorboards, hands pressed to the edges like it might fly away if I let go. I thought about Marissa, about how smug she looked that day at dinner. You believed that? Yeah, I did. And I believed in Grandma too, even when they all tried to erase her. Footsteps sounded below. I stiffened. The attic door creaked. Then a voice. Torrin. Evie? His voice was low, hesitant. I need to show you something, I called down. Come up. He stepped into the attic slowly, his eyes scanning the scene. Papers, tapes, the open safe. He froze. What is all this? The truth, I said, and you're going to help me use it. He walked to the tapes, picked one up. When he saw his name, he went pale. She knew, I said, about all of it, even you. He nodded slowly, then sat beside me. I'll do whatever you need. I looked at him. Not with forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe something close to alliance. We're going to fix this, I said. Legally, publicly, fully. Torrin looked toward the window. But before he could speak, my phone buzzed again. This time, another unknown number. One word. Careful. The text sat on my screen like a fingerprint. Careful. I didn't respond. Didn't breathe for a moment. Just stared. Torrin shifted beside me on the attic floor, the corner of his knee brushing mine. Another message? He asked. I nodded. Same number. He leaned in, read the word, and muttered, Still watching. My stomach clenched. We sat in silence. The only sound, the faint ticking from Grandma's old mantel clock downstairs. Each tick reminded me I was running out of time to act, but I was also finally close. So close. Then a knock echoed from downstairs. 3 hard taps, not hesitant, not friendly. Torrin and I locked eyes. My hand moved instinctively to the safe, sliding the folder of documents back inside. I closed it, turned the key, then stuffed it in my pocket. Torrin was already halfway down the ladder. I followed. The door creaked open just as we reached the living room. And there he was. Dad. Rain speckled his coat. His eyes were tired. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked at me with something unfamiliar on his face. Remorse. I figured I'd find you here, he said, voice rough. How? I asked, already knowing. He nodded toward Torrin. I asked him. Torrin stiffened beside me, but Dad held up a hand. Don't blame him. I've been watching too. I needed to talk, alone. I didn't move. I didn't invite him in, but he stepped inside anyway, dripping rain onto the hardwood floor. I saw the new deed filing, he said. And then the emails Marissa forwarded to me. You're putting everything out in the open now. I'm correcting everything you let happen. He didn't argue. Instead, he slowly took a seat in Grandma's old armchair and rested his elbows on his knees, palms steepled. There's something you don't know, he said quietly. Something you deserve to hear from me, not Marissa. Torrin sat again. I remained standing. I signed off on it, Dad said. All of it. The will change, the transfer, the gag order with the lawyer. My breath hitched. You what? I didn't want this war. I thought, if we could just keep the peace. You let her steal everything, I snapped. From Grandma, from me. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I thought Marissa could handle it. She was always louder, more confident. She told me you didn't want the house, that you'd moved on. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. The words echoed through the room. I stared at him, all the years folding into one. Holidays where Marissa's name always got praised first. Times I'd tell a story, and he'd only hear the punchline if she repeated it louder. I felt the familiar ache rise in my chest. "You weren't just a bystander," I said. "You enabled her." He didn't defend himself. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Worn. Yellowed. "Your grandmother gave this to me before she died. Told me to give it to you if I ever realized I'd chosen the wrong child." My throat burned. He handed it to me with shaking fingers. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. "Evie, if you're reading this, it means your father finally opened his eyes. It took longer than I hoped, but I believe in timing more than justice. This isn't about the house. It never was. It's about you knowing where you come from and why you were always the one meant to carry this legacy. There's one more thing I didn't leave in the safe. Check the floorboard beneath the rocking chair in the nursery, the one you always ran to when things got too loud. Love always, Grandma." My vision blurred. I hadn't thought of that room in years. The nursery, once mine, later storage. The rocking chair had stayed in the corner, unmoved for decades. I looked at Dad. He sat quietly, watching the rain trail down the windows. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I just wanted things quiet, controlled. And you let her take everything from me to get it." His shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry." It was the first time I'd heard him say it and mean it, but it didn't undo the damage. It didn't erase the years of silence, the complicity. Still, something in me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space. "I'm going upstairs," I said, "alone." Torrin started to follow, but I stopped him with a glance. He nodded. I moved through the hall slowly, every step stirring memories. The nursery door creaked as I pushed it open. Dust motes danced in the air, the rocking chair still tucked in the far corner. I knelt beside it, ran my hand over the warped floorboards until I found the loose one. I pried it up with a pocket knife, and there, wrapped in linen, another letter and a USB drive. I turned them over in my hand. My phone buzzed. Another text. Blocked number. "You've gone far enough. Walk away now, or lose more than a house." I stared at the message, pulse thudding in my ears. Then I looked down at the USB in my palm, and I knew this wasn't over, but it was finally moving toward truth. The USB burned a cold spot in my pocket the entire ride home. I didn't even wait to change clothes. I dropped my keys on the hallway table, kicked off my boots, and plugged the drive into my laptop. No password, no splash screen, just a single folder. Elsie Trust. Inside, scanned bank statements, property titles, lawyer correspondence dating back over a decade, and at the bottom, one video file for Evie. My chest tightened. I clicked. The screen filled with the faded light of Grandma's bedroom. She sat in her nightgown, thinner than I remembered, her eyes a little dull from illness, but her voice still sharp as ever. "Evie, if you're seeing this, they pushed too far." She adjusted the camera slightly. "I tried to trust them. I gave Robert a chance. I gave Marissa more chances than she deserved. But you always saw the cracks before they spread." She smiled, soft and sad. "Everything I've left, every letter, every key, every hidden thing, it wasn't a test. It was a map. Because I knew someday you'd need to find your way through the mess they left behind." I felt my hand clutch the edge of the desk. "I love them," she continued. "But love doesn't excuse betrayal, and it sure as hell doesn't rewrite the truth." The video ended with silence. No goodbye, no explanation, just her eyes holding mine across the screen, and a kind of stillness that broke something in me. I pressed my palms against my face. It didn't feel like winning. Not yet. I closed the laptop. The truth was mine now. But what was I supposed to do with it? That afternoon, I went back to the house. Not for revenge, not even for answers. I went to breathe, to decide. The sun was starting to set, streaks of gold breaking through the thick clouds like forgiveness trying to reach through. I unlocked the front door slowly. The air inside was quiet, still holding its breath. I walked through each room, the kitchen, the study, the back hall, fingertips trailing the familiar textures. Then the living room. That's where I found him. Torrin, sitting on the floor with a hammer, a bag of nails, and a roll of painter's tape. "What are you doing?" I asked, still standing in the doorway. He looked up sheepishly. "Thought I'd fix the molding. It's been cracked since we were kids." I didn't answer right away. I sat beside him, reached for a nail. "I found the video," I said. He nodded. "I figured. I'm still mad at you." "I know." I watched the light catch the side of his face. He looked older than he had a week ago. Lighter, too, like guilt had kept him heavy and now regret was just residue. "She never gave up on you," I said. "She shouldn't have," he replied. "But I gave her reasons." We didn't speak after that. We worked, taped up trim, hammered in nails, scrubbed out corners where time had hidden itself in dust and old coffee stains. Each motion felt like a kind of penance, or maybe a beginning. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something that held the same shape. That night I slept in the house for the first time since Grandma passed, alone, curled up in the guest room with the creaky twin bed and the floral quilt she'd made when I turned 16. I woke to sunlight cutting across the wooden floor in soft slices, and the faint smell of toast. I wandered downstairs barefoot to find Torin at the stove. "Thought I'd make breakfast," he said. "Like old times." Like old times used to mean fights over the last piece of bacon and burnt toast on purpose. But now it felt like a bridge. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Halfway through, he looked up and said, "You gonna tell me what was on that USB?" I paused, then nodded. "Everything." He leaned back. "So, what now?" I didn't have an answer. Until my phone buzzed, a new message, no name, just a photo of Marissa at an airport, passport in hand, and underneath it, "Leaving already?" My stomach dropped. I showed it to Torin. His face went pale. "She's trying to run!" I stood up, grabbed my keys. "I'm going to the lawyer's office," I said. "We file everything today, before she disappears." "Want me to come?" I looked at him, and this time, I nodded. We left the house with purpose, side by side, but just as we pulled onto the main road, my phone buzzed again. Same number. This time, a video. I hit play. It was dark, shaky footage. Someone walking through Grandma's house. Last night. The video ended on the attic door, half open, then a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." The video ended with that whisper still ringing in my ears. "You shouldn't have come back." Torin sat stiff beside me in the car, eyes locked on the screen. "Someone was in the house," I said quietly, like saying it too loud might summon them. He nodded. "Last night, after we left." I looked toward the road ahead. The law office was 5 blocks away, but suddenly it felt like a world I hadn't earned yet, not until I finished this. "I'm going back," I said. "Evie, I need to end this now, today." He didn't argue. He just turned the car around. The clouds were low and the wind carried the scent of wet pavement and something metallic, like rain mixed with rust. The house stood quiet, but not empty. I could feel it. The way you feel a storm just before it breaks. I stepped inside first. Every creak in the floorboard pressed against my spine. The attic door was ajar. The air felt colder there, heavier. I climbed slowly. And there, standing by the safe, back turned to me, was Marissa. I froze. She held one of the tapes in her hand, spinning it slowly between her fingers like it might explain everything if she looked hard enough. "You broke in," I said. She didn't flinch. "I had a key." Of course she did. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "I thought maybe there was still a version of this story where I wasn't the villain." I stepped closer. "There was, a long time ago." She looked older. Not in years, but in weight, in wear. "I didn't come to fight," she said. "I came to see what she left behind, what you had that I didn't. You had everything, applause, attention, belief. You didn't need the house." She looked at the shelves, the old trunk, the will folded beside the safe. "I thought I deserved it, for holding this family together. You didn't hold it together. You held it hostage." For the first time, her mouth trembled. Then she let the tape fall to the floor. "I'm leaving tonight." "I know." She blinked. "Of course you do." Silence stretched between us, like a thread pulled too tight. "I'm not going to stop you," I said. "But you need to know, everything's been filed. The lawyer, the court, the county. It's done." She nodded. Not surprised, just resigned. "I always thought being first meant being right," she whispered. "But she picked you, from the start. She didn't pick, I said. She trusted. Marissa turned, stepped toward the stairs. At the doorway, she paused. I hope you can do something with this place, she said, more than I would have. And then she was gone. No screaming, no last jab, just the sound of her steps fading down the hallway. I sank to the attic floor, breath shaking. Torrin climbed up quietly and sat beside me. She's really going? He asked. Yeah. We didn't need more words. The next day we delivered the safe contents to the lawyer. Within 48 hours, the reversal was official. The house, the trust, the legacy, all in my name. But none of that felt like the win. The win was what came next. A month later, the front door had a new brass knocker. The shutters were repainted, and the old nursery? It was now a sunlit design studio, plaster samples and reclaimed wood spread across the desk. Torrin helped me hang the sign out front. Elsie House, Restoration and Design. I didn't erase the history. I restored it, layer by layer. One afternoon, while sorting Grandma's old recipe cards, I found one I'd never seen before. It was blank, except for a single sentence. Strength is the quiet decision to keep building after they tried to bury you. I pressed the card to my chest and let the moment settle. They tried to break me, gaslight me, erase me, but they forgot. Some roots grow deeper in the dark, and when they finally break the surface, they don't ask permission. They claim what's theirs. If you've ever been the one they underestimated, if you've ever been the quiet one, watching everything, waiting for your moment, this story is proof. Legacy isn't given, it's protected, and no one can take what you've already earned. Thank you for staying with me till the very end. If this story struck a chord, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You deserve the truth, and the next story might be yours. I'll see you in the next one.